The iron gates of Blackmoor Castle groaned open, like the mouth of some ancient beast, revealing a fortress of grey stone that seemed to have grown from the moors themselves. Miss Helena Mordaunt sat rigid in the hired coach, her gloved hands clasped so tightly in her lap that her knuckles showed white through the worn kid leather. Through the rain-streaked windows, she could see turrets rising against a sky the colour of old pewter, their sharp edges cutting through the gathering dusk. At 26 years old, Helena had learned to measure her life in losses. It had been 3 years since her father, Baron Mordaunt, had died in disgrace. His gambling debts of £40,000 had stripped the family of everything save their tarnished name. Those 3 years had seen creditors seize Mordaunt Hall, her mother and younger sister sent to distant relations in Scotland, and Helena herself refusing charity to take a position at a dame school in Bristol, earning £12 per year. She had spent that time teaching spoiled merchant daughters their letters, while her own brilliant mind, her gift for mathematics and languages inherited from her father's better days, withered from disuse. The position at Blackmoor Castle offered £22 annually. A pittance, certainly, but enough to lift her from the grinding poverty of Bristol. Enough to perhaps eventually help her mother and sister. The advertisement had been brutally honest about the employer. Viscount Dalton of Blackmoor, widower, exacting standards, difficult temperament, companion and bookkeeper required. No delicate sensibilities need apply. Helena had no delicate sensibilities left to bruise. If stories of resilience and unlikely love in the face of tyranny move your heart, subscribe now and join us on this journey. You will not want to miss what happens next. The coach rolled to a stop before massive oak doors studded with iron. A footman appeared, his livery immaculate but his expression carefully blank. He handed Helena down without meeting her eyes, a studied neutrality that spoke volumes about the household she was entering. The housekeeper, a woman of perhaps 50 with steel-grey hair and a face carved from granite, waited in the entrance hall. "Miss Mordaunt," the woman said, her tone neither warm nor cold. "I am Mrs. Penrose. His lordship will see you immediately in his study. Follow me." There was no offer of refreshment after the long journey, nor a moment to compose herself. Helena straightened her spine and followed the housekeeper through corridors that seemed designed to intimidate. Dark paneling absorbed what little light the sconces provided. Portraits of stern-faced ancestors stared down from their frames, their painted eyes following her progress with apparent disapproval. The castle smelled of beeswax and something else, something bitter and cold that Helena could not quite identify. Mrs. Penrose stopped before a heavy door, knocked twice, and opened it without waiting for response. Lord Samuel Dalton stood before a fireplace, his back to the door, one hand resting on the mantel. He did not turn immediately, and Helena found herself cataloguing details with the precision that had once made her father proud of her observational skills. He was tall, easily over 6 feet. His broad shoulders were encased in a coat of such severe black it seemed to absorb the firelight. Dark hair, touched with grey at the temples, suggested a man who had aged before his time. When he finally turned, his face arrested her with its harsh planes and deep lines etched by what could only be bitterness. His eyes, pale grey like winter ice, swept over her with the dispassion of a man assessing livestock. "Miss Mordaunt," he said. His voice was cultured, educated, and utterly devoid of warmth. "I have made inquiries into your background. Your father was Baron Mordaunt of Suffolk." "Yes, my lord. The same Baron Mordaunt who squandered his family fortune at cards and dice like a common wastrel. Who died leaving debts that destroyed his family's position in society. Who proved that noble birth is no guarantee whatsoever of moral character or financial stewardship." The words struck like physical blows. Helena felt heat rise in her cheeks but kept her voice level. "My father made grave mistakes, my lord. I do not dispute that. Pray you inherited none of his weaknesses, Miss Mordaunt. I will not tolerate incompetence, laziness, or dishonesty in my household. Your duties will be demanding. You will serve as companion to my daughter when required, though she has a governess for her education. Primarily, you will manage household correspondence, maintain accounts, catalogue the library, and make yourself available whenever I require assistance. Is this understood?" "Perfectly, my lord. Your salary is £22 per year. paid quarterly. Mistakes will result in fines deducted from your wages. You will not speak unless addressed. You will not fraternize with the servants. You will maintain absolute discretion regarding all household matters. You may go." Helena curtsied and turned to leave, her mind already calculating how long she could survive on £22 if fines began accumulating. As she reached the door, his voice stopped her. "Miss Mordaunt, welcome to Blackmore Castle." There was something in those words, some dark amusement that made her skin prickle with foreboding. Mrs. Penrose led her up narrow servants' stairs to a tiny room tucked beneath the eaves. A narrow bed, a washstand, a single chair, and a small desk comprised the furnishings. The ceiling sloped so steeply that Helena could stand upright only in the center of the room. Through the single small window, she could see the moors stretching away into darkness, utterly isolated from any neighboring estate or village. "Breakfast is at 6, Mrs. Penrose said. "His lordship expects you in his study by 7 to receive the day's instructions. Do not be late, Miss Mordaunt. He dismisses servants for tardiness." When the door closed, Helena sank onto the bed and allowed herself exactly 5 minutes of despair. 5 minutes to acknowledge that she had entered a form of genteel imprisonment. 5 minutes to wonder if even £12 per year in Bristol might have been preferable to £22 in this Gothic fortress ruled by a tyrant. Then she unpacked her meagre belongings, washed her face in the cold water from the pitcher, and prepared for the morning. Survival demanded discipline. Survival demanded swallowing pride and enduring whatever Lord Samuel Dalton chose to inflict. She had survived worse. She would survive this. The first week taught Helena the true meaning of the word exacting. Lord Dalton summoned her at dawn to copy correspondence in her finest hand. When she presented the letters after 3 hours of careful work, he barely glanced at them before handing them back. "Your penmanship is disgraceful, Miss Mordaunt. Copy them again." She copied them again. He rejected them again. By the 8th iteration, her hand cramped and her eyes burned from the close work by candlelight. When he finally accepted the letters, he offered no acknowledgement of her effort. The household accounts proved equally fraught. He demanded she reconcile ledgers going back 5 years, then summoned her at midnight, claiming to have found errors. Helena spent hours searching for mistakes she could not see, convinced they did not exist, but unable to prove it without offending him further. "If you cannot manage simple arithmetic, Miss Mordaunt, perhaps you are unsuited to your position." She bit her tongue and redid the calculations. Again and again. The library cataloguing revealed his capacity for petty cruelty. He criticized her spelling, though every word was correct. He questioned her classifications, then changed his mind repeatedly about the system he wished implemented. He made her move heavy volumes from shelf to shelf, only to decide the original arrangement had been superior after all. Through it all, Helena remained silent, her face carefully composed, her responses minimal. She learned to anticipate his moods, to make herself small and unobtrusive, to endure the casual contempt he directed at her daily. But it was the treatment of his daughter that finally ignited the rage Helena had been suppressing. Lady Sophia Dalton was 9 years old, with her father's dark hair and a face that might have been lovely had it not been perpetually drawn with fear. Helena first encountered the child in the library, where Sophia had been locked as punishment for giggling during her lessons. "Inappropriate levity," the governess Miss Winters had explained, with pinched disapproval. "His lordship insists on absolute decorum." Through the locked door, Helena could hear soft crying. Her heart clenched. That evening, after her official duties ended, Helena retrieved a key from the housekeeper's ring while Mrs. Penrose attended to dinner preparations. She slipped into the library to find Sophia huddled in a window seat, her small body shaking with suppressed sobs. "Lady Sophia," Helena said softly, "I am Miss Mordaunt. I work for your father." The girl's head jerked up, terror flashing across her face. "Please do not tell Papa I was crying. He says crying is weakness. He will be so angry." Helena's fury at Lord Dalton crystallized into something hard and cold. She sat beside the child, maintaining a careful distance. "Crying is not weakness, my lady. It is simply what hearts do when they hurt. May I tell you a secret?" Sophia nodded, eyes wide. I cry sometimes too. Usually at night, when no one can see, because I miss my family and because some days are very difficult. Does that make me weak? No, Sophia whispered. You seem very strong. Then perhaps we are both strong, and tears do not change that truth. It was the beginning. Over the following weeks, Helena found ways to offer the child small kindnesses, a book left in an accessible location, a quiet moment of conversation when the governess was occupied, lessons in astronomy, whispered through Sophia's bedroom window in the evenings, pointing out constellations while the household slept. Sophia began to blossom, showing glimpses of intelligence and humor that her rigid education had suppressed. She confided in Helena the depth of her misery, the constant fear of displeasing her father, the echoing loneliness of the vast castle. Mama left because I disappointed her, Sophia said one evening, her voice small. Papa told me so. He said if I had been a better daughter, she would have stayed. Helena's hands clenched into fists. Lady Cassandra Dalton had not left because of her daughter. The scandal had been the talk of London 5 years prior. The Viscountess had run away with an Italian artist, choosing passion over position, leaving behind a husband publicly humiliated, and a child who believed herself responsible for her mother's abandonment. Lord Dalton was using that child's grief as a weapon to ensure her absolute obedience. Helena's hatred of her employer, already substantial, deepened into something implacable. It was during her 3rd week at Blackmore that Helena's gift for mathematics led to her discovery. Unable to sleep, plagued by the day's humiliations, she had taken to reviewing the household accounts as an intellectual exercise. Numbers soothed her in ways that nothing else could in this wretched place. They were logical, predictable, honest, unlike the people who generated them. She was cross-referencing repair invoices against actual work completed when she noticed the first discrepancy. A bill for roof repairs on the east wing, submitted by Mr. Cornelius Blackwell, the land steward, for £200. But Helena distinctly remembered Mrs. Penrose mentioning that the east wing roof had been repaired the previous year. Curious now, she began examining older ledgers with systematic precision. The pattern emerged slowly, then with devastating clarity. False invoices for repairs never completed, inflated costs for materials, phantom vendors who existed only on paper, duplicate billing for the same services. Over and over, across 6 years of accounts, Mr. Blackwell had been systematically embezzling from the estate. Helena worked through the nights, her candle burning low as she documented everything. She created a comprehensive ledger of discrepancies, cross-referenced with dates and actual work completed. She traced the money through layers of false transactions, with the skill her father had once taught her during better days, when he had hoped she might help manage the family estates. The total staggered her. £15,000, stolen with such brazen confidence that it had hidden in plain sight, protected by Lord Dalton's grief-induced inattention to his own affairs. She compiled the evidence into a leather portfolio, organizing it with meticulous care. Every invoice, every receipt, every contradiction laid out in irrefutable sequence. When she finished 3 days later, she sat back and considered her options. She could present the evidence to Lord Dalton as a gesture of loyalty, hoping to win his favor. But Helena had no interest in his favor. His cruelty to her she could perhaps forgive as the product of his own pain. His systematic destruction of his daughter's spirit, she could not. She could leave the evidence anonymously and disappear. But cowardice had never been among her failings. No, she would expose the theft, and then she would leave this wretched place with her head held high, giving Lord Samuel Dalton one final truth that he could not ignore or dismiss. The universe provided her opportunity sooner than expected. The morning was unseasonably warm for September, with golden sunlight breaking through the perpetual grey. Helena, having completed her assigned tasks early for once, slipped into the gardens for a brief respite. To her surprise, she found Lady Sophia there, carefully untangling string for a kite the head gardener, Mr. Davies, had helped her construct. "Miss Mordaunt!" Sophia's face lit with genuine joy. "Mr. Davies said I might fly it if the wind is right. Will you help me?" Helena glanced toward the castle, saw no one watching, and made a decision. I would be delighted, my lady. They spent the next hour in the garden, Helena running with the kite while Sophia shrieked with laughter, the sound so pure and unrestrained that it seemed to transform the very air around them. The child's face glowed with happiness, all traces of fear temporarily banished. When the kite finally caught the wind and soared, Sophia clapped her hands with delight. "Look, Miss Mordaunt, look how high it flies." "Like your spirit, my lady," Helena said softly. "Given the chance, it soars." It was in this moment of triumph that Lord Dalton found them. His voice cut across the garden like a blade. "What is the meaning of this?" Helena turned to find him striding toward them, his face contorted with fury. Sophia's joy evaporated instantly, replaced by the familiar mask of terror. The child's hands dropped to her sides, her body going rigid. "Inside, now." He directed this at Sophia, who fled toward the castle without a backward glance, abandoning the kite to fall from the sky. Lord Dalton turned his wrath on Helena. "You forget yourself and your place, Miss Mordaunt. You were hired to perform specific duties, not to corrupt my daughter with frivolous entertainments." Something inside Helena snapped. 3 weeks of accumulated rage, of swallowed pride, of witnessed cruelty to an innocent child erupted. "Corrupt?" Her voice shook with fury. "I gave your daughter 1 hour of simple happiness, 1 hour of being a child instead of a frightened prisoner in her own home. If you call that corruption, my lord, then your understanding of parenthood is as warped as your treatment of everyone in your household." His face went white, then red. "How dare you speak to me in such a manner? How dare you terrorize a 9-year-old child?" Helena stepped forward, past caution, past calculation. "She is terrified of you, my lord, absolutely terrified. She does not giggle during lessons because you have taught her that joy is punishable. She does not ask questions because you have taught her that curiosity earns your contempt. She barely speaks because you have taught her that her very existence disappoints you. That is enough." "It is not nearly enough." Helena's voice rose. "You told her that her mother left because she was a disappointing child. You use her grief over abandonment as a tool to ensure her absolute compliance. What manner of father does such a thing? What manner of man wounds his own daughter to salve his own pride?" "You are dismissed." Lord Dalton's words came out strangled. "Pack your belongings and leave before nightfall. I will provide no reference. You will tell no one of your time here." Helena reached into her pocket and withdrew a sealed letter. "I cannot be dismissed, my lord. I resigned yesterday evening." She watched with satisfaction as comprehension dawned on his face, followed by shock. She had beaten him to it. She had claimed the power of choosing her own departure. "This letter," Helena continued, her voice steady now, "is addressed to your solicitor, Mr. Thomas Hartwell of Lincoln's Inn. It contains my formal resignation, effective immediately. I posted it via the afternoon coach yesterday. What you hold now is merely your courtesy copy." Lord Dalton stared at the letter in her hand as though it were a serpent. His jaw worked, but no words emerged. Helena was not finished. "Before I leave your employment, however, I have a parting gift." She produced the leather portfolio from where she had hidden it beneath a stone bench. "Your land steward, Mr. Cornelius Blackwell, has been systematically stealing from you for 6 years, £15,000 to be precise. I have documented everything." She opened the portfolio, displaying the meticulously organized evidence. False invoices for repairs never completed, inflated costs for materials that were never delivered, phantom vendors who exist only to receive your money and funnel it into Mr. Blackwell's accounts, duplicate billing for the same services, all of it here, organized by date and property, with copies of the ledgers and receipts as proof. Lord Dalton reached for the portfolio with shaking hands, his face draining of color as he scanned the top page. "You were so occupied making everyone around you miserable," Helena continued, her voice like cut glass, "that you failed to notice the actual thief sitting at your own table twice monthly, complimenting your wine while robbing you blind. Mr. Blackwell dined here last Thursday, did he not? Praised your Burgundy while discussing next quarter's property improvements, improvements he will bill you for but never complete, just as he has done for 6 years." She let the words sink in, watching him process the magnitude of both the theft and his own blindness to it. "And there is one more thing you should know, my lord. Helena's voice dropped to something quiet and devastating. Your daughter prays every night. Do you know what she prays for? She prays that you will die. Those were her exact words to me. She said that if you died, the house would finally be happy again. The portfolio slipped from Lord Dalton's nerveless fingers, scattering papers across the stone bench. Congratulations, my lord. You have so terrorized a 9-year-old child that she wishes for her own father's death. That is your legacy. That is what your grief and bitterness have achieved. You have created a household where your daughter prays for your demise because it represents the only hope she has for happiness. Helena watched him crumble before her eyes, his rigid posture collapsing as though his spine had turned to water. She felt no triumph, only exhaustion and a vast aching pity. I have sent copies of all the financial documentation to Mr. Hartwell as well, she said more quietly. Mr. Blackwell will be arrested within the week. The evidence is irrefutable. You are welcome, my lord, for saving you from further financial ruin, if not from yourself. She turned to leave, her spine straight and her head high. Miss Mordaunt. Helena paused, but did not turn back. Why? His voice was raw, stripped of its usual commanding tone. Why document the theft if you were already planning to resign? Why not simply leave and let me continue to be robbed? Helena looked back over her shoulder. Because the theft was wrong, regardless of my feelings toward you. Because Mr. Blackwell's crime harmed not just you, but every tenant and servant, whose welfare depends on the estate's solvency. Because I may despise you, my lord, but I am not you. I do not punish the innocent to satisfy my own grievances. She walked away then, leaving him standing alone in the garden with his failures scattered at his feet like autumn leaves. Mrs. Penrose was waiting in the entrance hall when Helena descended with her modest trunk. The housekeeper's face was carefully neutral, but she pressed a small purse into Helena's hand. From the staff, miss, she said quietly, for speaking up for Lady Sophia, for standing up to him. We wanted you to know it mattered. Helena's throat tightened. Thank you, Mrs. Penrose. Please look after her. We will do our best, miss, though none of us have your courage. The coach was waiting. Helena climbed inside without looking back at the castle, at the gardens where she had given a child 1 hour of joy, at the study where she had endured 3 weeks of systematic cruelty. As the iron gates closed behind her, she allowed herself to feel the full weight of her exhaustion. She had escaped. She had exposed the truth. She had preserved her dignity. But as the coach carried her toward an uncertain future, toward a cousin's dressmaking shop in Spitalfields, and whatever marginal existence she could cobble together there, Helena could not help but wonder if dignity was worth the price of near destitution. She closed her eyes and counted her remaining money, enough for the coach fare to London, enough for perhaps 1 week's lodging while she found work. After that, the void. She had made her choice. She would not regret it. Even as fear gnawed at her belly, even as the future stretched before her dark and formless, Helena Mordaunt would not regret choosing truth over security. Lord Samuel Dalton stood in the garden long after the sound of Helena's departing coach faded into silence. The scattered papers of her evidence lay around him like accusations, each page a testament to his catastrophic failure. Not merely the failure to notice Blackwell's theft, though that was damning enough. The deeper failure, the one that had driven the only honest person in his household to resign rather than endure another day under his roof. He picked up one of the pages, his hands shaking. The meticulous detail of her documentation spoke of hours, perhaps days, of painstaking work. Work she had done while enduring his contempt, his petty cruelties, his deliberate humiliations. She had discovered his steward's betrayal and still chosen to expose it before leaving, giving him truth as a parting gift, even though he had given her nothing but misery. And Sophia, his daughter, his child. She prays that you will die. The words reverberated through his skull like cathedral bells, each repetition stripping away another layer of his carefully constructed justifications. He had told himself that he was teaching Sophia strength, discipline, the iron control necessary to survive in a world that had shown him nothing but betrayal. He had convinced himself that his harshness was a form of protection, that if she learned to expect nothing, she could never be disappointed. But he had not been protecting her. He had been punishing her for her mother's abandonment, punishing a child for the sins of a woman who had chosen another man over her own family, punishing Sophia simply for existing, for being a daily reminder of his humiliation. Samuel sank onto the stone bench, the portfolio of evidence clutched in his hands, and for the first time in 5 years, he allowed himself to truly see what he had become. A tyrant, a bully, a man so consumed by his own bitterness that he had nearly destroyed his own daughter's soul. He rose abruptly and strode into the castle, taking the stairs to Sophia's room 2 at a time. He found her there, curled on her bed with her face buried in a pillow, her small body shaking with sobs. The governess, Miss Winters, sat in the corner, her expression one of smug satisfaction. "Leave us," Samuel commanded. Miss Winters opened her mouth to object, then saw something in his face that made her flee without argument. Samuel approached his daughter's bed slowly, as one might approach a frightened animal. He knocked gently on the bedpost. "Sophia, may I come in?" The child's head jerked up, her face swollen and wet with tears. Fear radiated from her like heat from a flame. She nodded, unable to speak, and Samuel felt something in his chest crack and splinter. He sat on the edge of the bed, maintaining distance, trying to find words for the enormity of what he needed to say. "I have nothing to apologize for," he began, then stopped. "No, that is not true. That is another lie I have been telling myself. I must apologize for everything, Sophia, for every harsh word, for every punishment inflicted for imagined infractions, for making you believe that your mother left because of you when that was never, ever true." Sophia stared at him, disbelief warring with desperate hope on her small face. "Your mother left because of her own choices," Samuel continued, his voice rough, "because she chose to pursue her own desires without thought for the consequences. That was her failing, her weakness, not yours. You were a child, you are a child, and I have been cruel to you beyond measure because I was too much a coward to face my own pain." "Papa." The word was barely a whisper. "I convinced myself I was teaching you strength," Samuel said, "but I was teaching you only fear, teaching you to suppress every natural joy, every moment of childhood wonder, because I could not bear to see happiness when I myself was so miserable. That was unconscionable, unforgivable." The tears came then, years of suppressed anguish pouring from Sophia in great wrenching sobs. Samuel gathered his daughter into his arms, holding her while she wept, his own tears falling into her dark hair. "I do not want you to die, Papa," Sophia gasped between sobs. "I just wanted you to love me. I just wanted you to be kind to me like Miss Mordaunt was. I just wanted you to see me." "I do see you," Samuel said, his voice breaking. "And I do love you. I have always loved you, even when I was too damaged to show it properly. Can you forgive me, sweetheart? Can you give me a chance to be the father you deserve?" Sophia clung to him, her small hands fisting in his coat, and nodded against his chest. They sat together for a long time, father and daughter, beginning the slow work of mending what had been so badly broken. In the days that followed, Samuel Dalton set about transforming his household with the same systematic precision Helena had used to document Blackwell's crimes. He summoned his solicitor, who confirmed that the evidence was indeed irrefutable. Cornelius Blackwell was arrested, tried and sentenced to transportation. The stolen funds, or what could be recovered of them, were returned to the estate coffers. Samuel raised wages for every servant, issued apologies to those he had mistreated, and dismissed Miss Winters, replacing her with a gentler governess who taught Sophia with patience and encouragement. He spent hours with his daughter each day, learning who she was beneath the fear he had instilled. He discovered that she was clever, kind, possessed of a quick wit and a fascination with the natural world that he had never allowed her to explore. But through all these changes, through every improvement he implemented, Samuel could not stop thinking about Helena Mordaunt. She haunted him, not merely with guilt, though that was substantial. She haunted him with the memory of her fierce dignity, her refusal to be broken despite everything he had done to demean her. She had endured 3 weeks of systematic cruelty and emerged with her integrity intact, her courage undiminished. She had documented his steward's betrayal not for personal gain, but because it was the right action. She had defended his daughter at the cost of her own position because the child's welfare mattered more than her own security. Everything he had done to her, every humiliation he had inflicted, she had met with quiet strength, until the moment she chose to speak, and then her words had been like a surgeon's blade, cutting away the rot of his self-deception with brutal precision. He needed to find her, to apologize properly, to make amends if such a thing were even possible. Samuel hired an inquiry agent, a discreet man named Mr. Robert Finch, who specialized in locating missing persons. It took 3 weeks of searching, but Finch finally traced Helena to a dressmaking establishment in Spitalfields, one of London's most wretched neighborhoods. The report Finch provided made Samuel's blood run cold. Helena was working 14 hours daily for £6 per year, sleeping in a boarding house infested with bedbugs and rats, destroying her hands with endless stitching by inadequate candlelight. The dressmaker who employed her, a Mrs. Grimsby, was known for exploiting desperate women, extracting maximum labor for minimum wage. Samuel departed for London immediately. He found the dressmaking shop on a narrow street thick with coal smoke and human misery. The building leaned as though exhausted by its own existence. Through the grimy window, he could see rows of women hunched over their work, their faces grey with fatigue. Helena sat near the back, her chestnut hair escaping from its pins, her grey eyes focused with desperate concentration on the tiny stitches she was setting into a cream-coloured gown. Her fingers moved with mechanical precision, but Samuel could see the toll the work was taking. Her hands were red and swollen. Her shoulders curved inward as though trying to protect herself from the world. He pushed open the door. The bell announced his arrival with a jangling discord. Every head turned toward him, the obvious wealth of his attire drawing stares from the exhausted seamstresses. Helena looked up, and her eyes widened with shock before narrowing with immediate wariness. Mrs. Grimsby, a woman whose sharp features matched her sharp voice, hurried forward. "My lord, how may I serve you? We create the finest garments in London for the most discerning clientele." "I wish to speak with Miss Mordaunt," Samuel said, his eyes never leaving Helena's face. "She is occupied with urgent work, my lord. Perhaps if you return tomorrow she will be available." "Now," Samuel said quietly. The word carried absolute authority. Mrs. Grimsby's mouth compressed into a thin line, but she nodded curtly. "Miss Mordaunt, you may take 5 minutes." Helena rose stiffly, setting aside the gown with careful precision. She walked toward Samuel with her spine straight despite her obvious exhaustion and gestured toward the door. They stepped into the filthy street, the stench of refuse and human waste overwhelming in the October heat. "My lord," Helena said, her voice carefully neutral, "if you seek restitution for the time I did not complete in your employment, I have nothing to give." "I came to apologize," Samuel interrupted, "for my treatment of you, for the cruelty I inflicted, for every humiliation, every petty abuse of power, every moment I made you feel small and worthless, when the truth was that you possessed more integrity in your smallest finger than I have demonstrated in years." Helena stared at him, clearly stunned into silence. "You were right," Samuel continued, the words pouring from him now, "about everything. About Blackwell and his theft, about my cruelty to Sophia, most especially about the man I had become. I spent 5 years punishing the world for my wife's abandonment, and in doing so I nearly destroyed my daughter. You stopped me. Not gently, but truth is not always gentle. You delivered it like a slap across the face, and it was exactly what I needed." He saw Helena's rigid posture soften slightly, curiosity replacing wariness in her expression. "How is Sophia?" she asked quietly. "Better," Samuel said. "We are both better. I am attempting to be the father she deserves, and she is patient with my failures, more patient than I have earned. I dismissed Miss Winters and hired Mrs. Anne Fletcher, who teaches with kindness. Sophia is learning astronomy properly now, not just through whispered lessons at her window. She asks about you repeatedly. She misses you." A muscle worked in Helena's jaw, and Samuel saw the sheen of unshed tears in her eyes before she blinked them away. "The evidence you compiled led to Blackwell's arrest," Samuel continued. "He was tried, convicted, and transported to Australia. The Crown recovered most of the stolen funds. Your work saved the estate from continued losses that might have eventually bankrupted us entirely." "I am glad," Helena said simply, "which brings me to my purpose beyond apology." Samuel drew a breath, aware that what he was about to propose might be rejected, that he had no right to expect anything from this woman after what he had done to her. "I need a governess for Sophia, someone to oversee her education, manage her schedule, ensure her well-being, someone she already trusts, who has demonstrated genuine care for her welfare despite personal cost." He saw Helena's eyes narrow with suspicion. "I am offering you the position," Samuel said, £200 per year. Complete authority over Sophia's education and all household matters as they pertain to her care. Comfortable quarters in the family wing, not the servants' attic. Adequate staff to assist you. And my guarantee, given as a gentleman, that you will be treated with the respect both your position and your person deserve." Helena's laugh was short and bitter. "Why, my lord? Why make such an offer?" "Because you deserve better than this." Samuel gestured at the squalid street, at the dressmaking shop with its grinding poverty. "Because my daughter needs you. Because I need you, though not as a secretary or bookkeeper. I need someone in my household who will tell me when I am wrong, who will hold me accountable to being the man I am trying to become. I need you to be my conscience, Miss Mordaunt." "That is quite a burden to place on an employee, my lord." "It is," Samuel agreed, "and if you accept, I will endeavor to make it worth bearing." Helena was silent for a long moment, her gaze searching his face for something he hoped she could find. Finally she spoke, and her voice carried the steel he remembered from their confrontation in the garden. "If I agree to return to Blackmoor, my lord, you must understand something absolutely clearly. I will not tolerate being treated as I was before. Not even once. The first time you speak to me with contempt, the first time you attempt to humiliate me or undermine my authority regarding Sophia, I will leave immediately. I do not care how much you are paying me. I do not care if it means returning to this workshop or somewhere worse." She stepped closer, her grey eyes blazing with fierce determination. "I would rather starve, my lord, than subject myself again to the treatment you inflicted during my previous employment. So if you are offering this position out of pity, or to assuage your guilt, or because you believe I will be grateful enough to accept future abuse in exchange for better wages, then save us both the disappointment and withdraw the offer now." Samuel felt something unfamiliar stir in his chest. Not shame, though there was that. Not guilt, though that too was present. This was something else. Admiration. Respect for the indomitable will of the woman before him, who had every reason to despise him, and yet still possessed the courage to set her own terms. "I am not offering from pity," he said quietly. "Though I admit guilt is a factor. I am offering because you are the best person to care for my daughter, because I believe your presence at Blackmoor will make us all better, and because you deserve the opportunity to use your considerable abilities in a position worthy of them." He met her gaze steadily. "I give you my word as a gentleman that I will treat you with the respect your position and your person deserve. If I fail in that promise, I will not blame you for leaving. More than that, I will provide you with a full year's salary and an excellent reference should you ever need to seek another position." Helena studied him for a long moment, allowing the silence to stretch. She was not weighing his honesty so much as her own resilience. Could she return to that house of shadows? Yet seeing the genuine remorse in his eyes, she realized her fear was not of his cruelty, but of the vulnerability his newfound kindness might provoke in her own heart. Finally, she nodded once. "Then I accept, my lord. When do you wish me to begin?" "Immediately, if you are able. I will settle your account with Mrs. Grimsby and arrange transport back to Blackmoor." Helena's expression softened just slightly. "Then I will collect my belongings. They will not take long to pack." She turned to go, then paused. "My lord, thank you for the apology, for the opportunity. I hope we can both prove worthy of this second chance." "As do I, Miss Mordaunt," Samuel said. "As do I." The return to Blackmoor Castle bore no resemblance to Helena's first arrival. This time she travelled in Lord Dalton's own carriage, comfortable and well sprung. This time her quarters were a spacious suite in the family wing, with a sitting room, a proper bedroom, and a view of the gardens rather than the moors. This time, when she descended to the entrance hall, it was to find Sophia waiting with barely contained excitement. "Miss Mordaunt!" The child launched herself forward, wrapping her arms around Helena's waist with the unself-conscious affection of a happy child. "You came back. Papa said you might, but I was afraid you would not wish to after—" She stopped, suddenly conscious of what she had been about to say. Helena knelt to bring herself to eye level with Sophia. "After your father and I had our disagreement." "Yes, that happened. But people can change, my lady. And your father has convinced me that he is genuinely attempting to be better. Should we give him the chance to prove it?" Sophia nodded vigorously. "He is different, Miss Mordaunt. He truly is. He listens now. He laughs sometimes. He let me have a telescope and we watched the stars together last week, and he did not scold me once for asking too many questions." Helena felt her throat tighten. She rose and looked at Lord Dalton, who stood watching the exchange with an expression of such naked hope that it transformed his harsh features into something almost vulnerable. "Then I am very glad I returned," Helena said softly. The months that followed brought transformation to Blackmore Castle that would have seemed impossible to the broken household Helena had first encountered. She took charge of Sophia's education with enthusiasm, expanding the curriculum far beyond the rigid limitations Miss Winters had imposed. They studied mathematics and languages, history and literature, astronomy and natural philosophy. Helena discovered that her young charge possessed a brilliant mind, eager for knowledge, a kind heart, and a resilient spirit that had survived her father's cruelty remarkably intact. Lord Dalton kept his promise. He treated Helena with unfailing courtesy, consulting her on matters relating to Sophia, deferring to her judgment on educational decisions, and maintaining appropriate professional boundaries. But Helena noticed other changes as well. He spent hours with his daughter, taking her riding across the moors, reading to her in the evenings, attending her lessons when his schedule permitted. The harsh lines of his face gradually softened. His rare smiles, when they came, illuminated his features with unexpected warmth. Helena found herself watching him more than she should. She noticed the way his hands moved with decisive grace when he reviewed documents. She observed how he listened to the concerns of his tenants with genuine attention, implementing improvements to their cottages and fields. She saw him in unguarded moments with Sophia, his expression tender with the love he was finally learning to express. And she felt her own carefully guarded heart begin to betray her. It started with small things, the way her pulse quickened when he entered a room, the consciousness of his presence even when she was not looking at him, the pleasure she took in his rare words of approval, the warmth that bloomed in her chest when he smiled at something Sophia said, his eyes crinkling at the corners with genuine amusement. Helena recognized the danger. She was the governess. He was the Viscount. Any feelings beyond professional respect were both inappropriate and futile. She had seen enough of the world to know that men of his station did not form attachments to women of hers, not honorable attachments at any rate. She would be a fool to allow herself to hope. But the heart, Helena was discovering, cared very little for the dictates of reason. Lord Dalton, for his part, found himself equally confounded by his growing feelings for his daughter's governess. He told himself that his interest was merely gratitude for the transformation she had wrought in his household, that his awareness of her was simply appropriate appreciation for her considerable abilities, that the way his heart lifted when she entered his study to discuss Sophia's progress was entirely professional in nature. He was lying to himself, and he knew it. Helena Mordaunt had somehow become essential to his existence. Her quiet intelligence challenged him. Her fierce protectiveness of Sophia touched something deep in his chest. Her refusal to tolerate his worst impulses kept him honest in ways nothing else could. And her beauty, which he had failed to notice during his determined cruelty, now seemed impossible to ignore. The way afternoon light caught in her chestnut hair. The expressive quality of her grey eyes, which could convey warmth, humour, or withering disapproval with equal eloquence. The grace of her movements, the music of her voice when she read to Sophia. He was falling in love with her, and the realization terrified him. It was Sophia who forced the issue, as children so often do. 3 months after Helena's return, the child asked with the blunt directness of youth, "Papa, will you marry Miss Mordaunt?" Samuel, who had been reviewing correspondence, nearly dropped the letter he was holding. "What manner of question is that?" "A sensible one, I think," Sophia said, her expression serious. "You like her very much. I can tell because you smile more when she is nearby, and she likes you too, though she pretends not to notice when you look at her." "Mrs. Penrose says you moon about like a lovesick calf, though I'm not entirely certain what that means. Mrs. Penrose should perhaps exercise more discretion in her observations," Samuel said, his face heating. "But do you love her, Papa?" Sophia persisted. "Because I love her very much. She is kind and patient and makes me feel safe, and I think she would make you happy, which you deserve to be after being so sad for so long." Samuel set aside his correspondence and pulled his daughter onto his lap, marveling at how natural the gesture had become. "I do care for Miss Mordaunt deeply, but there are complications, sweetheart. I treated her very badly when she first came to Blackmore. She has every reason to think poorly of me." "Then you must apologize again and convince her otherwise," Sophia said, with the confidence of a child who had recently experienced the power of genuine contrition. "And perhaps bring her flowers. Miss Mordaunt likes the roses from the south garden." Samuel laughed despite himself. "You have been planning this campaign quite thoroughly, I see." "Someone must," Sophia said primly. "You are both being quite silly about the entire matter." But approaching Helena proved more difficult than Samuel had anticipated. He found himself tongue-tied in her presence, fumbling for words like a boy experiencing his first infatuation. Every carefully prepared speech fled his mind the moment her grey eyes met his. He brought her the roses from the south garden, muttering something incoherent about appreciation for her work with Sophia. He asked her opinion on estate matters that had nothing to do with education, simply for the excuse to speak with her. He found reasons to linger when she brought Sophia to bid him good night, treasuring the domestic warmth of these evening moments. Helena, watching these awkward courtship attempts with growing comprehension, felt her own resistance crumbling. She told herself to maintain proper distance. She reminded herself daily of the vast gulf in their stations. She catalogued all the reasons why encouraging his attention would be disastrous. But when he looked at her with such tentative hope in his grey eyes, when he brought her roses because his daughter had mentioned she admired them, when he listened to her opinions as though they genuinely mattered to him, Helena found it increasingly difficult to protect her heart. The crisis came from an unexpected quarter. Lady Lillian Wickham, sister to Samuel's departed wife Lady Cassandra, arrived at Blackmore unannounced in early December. She swept into the castle with the presumption of family privilege, her silk travelling costume impeccable, despite the long journey from London, her expression one of barely concealed malice. Helena first encountered her in the drawing-room, where Lady Lillian was taking tea with evident disapproval of the hospitality. "You must be the new governess," Lillian said, her gaze travelling over Helena with the calculation of a predator assessing prey. "Samuel mentioned he had hired someone to oversee dear Sophia's education. How very industrious of you to secure such a comfortable position." There was something in her tone, some edge of insinuation, that made Helena's spine stiffen. "I am Miss Helena Mordaunt, yes. I have the privilege of serving as Lady Sophia's governess and educational overseer." "Indeed." Lillian's smile was all teeth and no warmth. "And I understand you have been here several months now. How remarkably well you have settled into the household. Tell me, Miss Mordaunt, what particular skills qualified you for such a dramatic elevation in status? Superior education, perhaps? Impressive family connections?" The insult was delicately delivered but unmistakable. Helena met Lillian's gaze with cool composure. "My qualifications include literacy, mathematical competence sufficient to prevent fraud, discretion in protecting those under my care, and genuine affection for Lady Sophia's well-being. I am given to understand these skills are surprisingly rare, making them worth celebrating." Lillian's eyes narrowed. "How very confident you are in your own worth, Miss Mordaunt. One might almost call it presumptuous." "One might," Helena agreed pleasantly, "though I prefer to call it self-respect, a quality I value highly after being without it for too long." Over the following days, Lillian made her presence felt throughout the household. She criticized the servants, found fault with every meal, and treated Sophia with a patronizing affection that the child visibly disliked, but her primary target was Helena. Lillian spread whispers throughout the household that Miss Mordaunt was unseemly close to the family, that her influence over Lord Dalton suggested improper intimacy, that governesses who overstepped their station often had designs on vulnerable widowers. The implications grew progressively more sordid with each retelling. The local gentry, who had begun accepting invitations to Blackmore again after years of Lord Dalton's self-imposed isolation, suddenly grew distant. Calls ceased. Invitations were politely declined. The social thaw that had been developing reversed into renewed isolation. Helena endured the whispers with outward calm, but the constant assault on her reputation took its toll. She began taking meals in her room rather than joining the family. She kept to Sophia's wing of the castle, except when duty required otherwise. She avoided situations where she might be alone with Lord Dalton, conscious that Lillian's watchful eyes catalogued every interaction for later distortion. Samuel, meanwhile, seethed with fury at his sister-in-law's behavior. He confronted Lillian directly, only to have her claim wounded innocence. "I merely express concern for your household's reputation, Samuel. Surely you can see how the situation appears. A young, unmarried governess living in the family wing, enjoying privileges far beyond her station, exerting unusual influence over your daughter. People talk. I am trying to protect you from further scandal." "The only scandal I perceive," Samuel said coldly, "is your campaign to destroy the reputation of the best person to enter this household in years." "Then you admit she has unusual influence?" Lillian pounced. "Really, Samuel, can you not see what she is doing? Insinuating herself into your affections through your daughter. It is the oldest scheme in existence." Samuel forced himself to speak calmly. "Miss Mordaunt has done nothing improper. Your insinuations are both unfounded and unwelcome." But Lillian was not finished. She planned her attack with the precision of a military campaign, culminating in a dinner party she convinced Samuel to host. 30 guests from the local gentry, carefully selected to maximize the impact of her planned humiliation. Helena had tried to decline attendance, but Samuel insisted, and she lacked grounds to refuse without revealing the depth of her discomfort. She dressed with care in her best gown, a simple grey silk that emphasized her eyes, and descended to the drawing room where the guests were assembling. The whispers began immediately. Helena felt the weight of hostile stares, heard the subtle cessation of conversation when she passed groups of guests. She held her head high and took her seat at the dinner table, determined to endure whatever came with dignity. Lillian waited until the third course to strike. "Miss Mordaunt," she said, her voice carrying clearly in the sudden silence, "it is quite gratifying to see how far you have risen in such a short time, from governess to virtual family member. What particular skills qualified you for such a dramatic elevation of status? Superior education, perhaps? Impressive family connections? Or perhaps other talents best not discussed in polite company?" The insult was naked now, the implication of sexual impropriety delivered before 30 witnesses. Helena heard the shocked intake of breath from several guests, saw the gleam of malicious satisfaction in others' eyes. Lord Dalton began to rise, his face dark with fury, but Helena stayed him with a subtle gesture. She reached into her reticule and withdrew a small leather notebook, opening it with deliberate care. "An interesting question, Lady Lillian," Helena said, her voice pleasant and clear. "What skills indeed? Let me enumerate them for this distinguished company. I possess literacy, which allows me to read and comprehend complex texts. I have mathematical competence sufficient to identify and document financial fraud before it bankrupts an estate. I exercise discretion in protecting those under my care from cruelty and negligence. These skills are apparently rare enough in our current age to be worth celebrating." She turned a page in her notebook with precise deliberation. "For example, I have documented the past 18 months of household expenditures for Blackmore Castle, including certain curious entries that caught my attention. Regular payments of £60 monthly to Lady Lillian Wickham, purportedly for charitable purposes. £1,080 total over that period. Lillian's face drained of color, her composure fracturing. Helena continued in the same pleasant tone. Naturally, I was curious about these charitable expenditures, so I made inquiries through appropriate channels. It seems the charity in question is actually the Golden Lion gaming establishment in London. Rather an unusual charity, as it operates primarily to separate foolish aristocrats from their money through games of chance. Lady Lillian has lost approximately £1,500 there over the past 2 years. The silence in the dining room was absolute, taut as a bowstring waiting to snap. Every eye turned toward Lillian, whose face had gone from white to mottled red. The discrepancy between the £1,080 received from Lord Dalton's accounts and the £1,500 lost at the Golden Lion suggests additional pecuniary means, Helena observed. Likely your husband's estate, though I have not investigated that particular matter out of respect for family privacy. I assumed Lord Dalton was aware that his charitable donations were actually funding your ruinous passion for gaming, but your earlier comments suggest otherwise. A guest, Lord Rutherford, spoke into the stunned silence. Is this true, Lady Lillian? Lillian's composure shattered entirely. How dare you! She turned on Helena with vicious fury. How dare you make such accusations? You are a servant, nothing more. You have no right to question me. I have every right, Helena interrupted, her voice cutting like steel, to defend myself against slander. You have spent days spreading lies about my character, whispering insinuations about improper intimacy, attempting to destroy my reputation while sitting at this very table eating food purchased with money you obtained through systematic deception. She stood, drawing herself to her full height, her grey eyes blazing with righteous anger. You ask what skills qualified me for my position, Lady Lillian? Keen observation. The ability to follow money through layers of false claims and identify theft hidden in plain sight. Financial stewardship that saved this estate from continued losses to an embezzling steward, and apparently from continued losses to a gambling-addicted relation. And the courage to confront corruption when I find it, regardless of the perpetrator's social standing. Helena turned to address the assembled guests directly. These are my skills, ladies and gentlemen. These are what brought me to Lord Dalton's attention and made me valuable to this household. These same skills have just exposed Lady Lillian as a thief and a liar before 30 witnesses. If she wishes to question my character after being revealed as someone who steals from her own family while spreading malicious gossip, I welcome that comparison. Lord Dalton rose, his face a mask of cold fury directed at his sister-in-law. Lady Lillian, you will leave Blackmore immediately. You will repay the £1,080 stolen from this estate's coffers with appropriate interest. You will never set foot on this property or in my presence again, or I will have you arrested for fraud. Is that perfectly clear? Lillian rose on shaking legs, her social destruction complete and absolute. She fled the dining room without another word, her dignity in tatters. The remaining guests, after a moment of shocked silence, began to applaud. Lord Rutherford raised his glass. To Miss Mordaunt, a woman of remarkable skills indeed. May we all have such capable defenders of truth in our households. The toast was echoed around the table. Helena sat down on trembling legs, her heart pounding, and met Lord Dalton's eyes across the table. His expression held such admiration, such pride in her courage, that she felt heat rise in her cheeks. The vindication was complete. The whispers stopped. The local gentry began calling again, this time with genuine respect for the governess who had demonstrated both competence and spine. Invitations resumed, and Helena found herself treated as a valued member of the household rather than mere hired help. But the deeper transformation was in what the confrontation had revealed about her own feelings. Watching Lord Dalton defend her, seeing his fury at the attempt to damage her reputation, feeling the warmth of his approval when she defended herself, Helena could no longer deny the truth. She was in love with Samuel Dalton. The realization terrified her. Loving him meant vulnerability to the kind of pain she had sworn never to risk again. It meant hoping for something that society deemed impossible. It meant gambling her hard-won security on the improbable chance that a viscount might choose to marry his daughter's governess. But the heart, having made its choice, refused to be reasoned with. Samuel, for his part, had watched Helena destroy Lillian's attack with a combination of awe and fierce pride. The woman he loved, because he could no longer deny that he loved her, had just demonstrated the steel beneath her dignified exterior. She had defended herself with precision and courage, turning the assault back on her attacker with devastating effectiveness. He wanted to marry her. The realization was not new, but watching her command the room with such authority crystallized his determination. He would court her properly. He would convince her that his regard was genuine, that he treasured not merely her skills but her spirit, her fierce integrity, her indomitable will. He would prove himself worthy of her. The courtship that followed was conducted with the intensity of two people who had already seen each other at their worst and chosen to move forward regardless. Samuel brought Helena roses from the South Garden weekly. He sought her opinion on estate matters that extended far beyond Sophia's education. He read poetry aloud in the library, while she sat nearby with her needlework, both of them pretending the activity was coincidental rather than deliberately arranged. Helena allowed herself to hope. She accepted the roses with growing warmth. She offered her insights freely, discovering that Samuel genuinely valued her intelligence. She lingered in the library long past any reasonable excuse, treasuring the domestic intimacy of their evening readings. Sophia watched these developments with the satisfaction of a successful matchmaker and dropped increasingly unsubtle hints about weddings and stepmothers. It was on a December evening, 3 years after Helena's first arrival at Blackmore, that Samuel finally found the words that had eluded him for months. They were in the library, the fire crackling in the hearth, Sophia long since in bed. Helena was reading while Samuel pretended to review correspondence, but actually spent his time watching the firelight play across her features. "Helena," he said softly. She looked up, and the warmth in her eyes made his heart stutter. "Yes, my lord." "I wish you would call me Samuel." "That would be highly improper, my lord." "Then I shall have to make it proper." Samuel set aside his papers and moved to kneel beside her chair. "Helena Mordaunt, I am aware that I have no right to your favorable regard after the cruelty I inflicted when we first met. I am aware that the difference in our stations makes this presumptuous, but I have discovered that I am utterly incapable of maintaining honorable separation from the woman I love." Helena's breath caught. Her book slipped from nerveless fingers. "I love you," Samuel continued, taking her hands in his. "I love your courage, your fierce integrity, your refusal to tolerate injustice even when it costs you dearly. I love the way you have transformed my daughter from a frightened child into a confident young woman. I love the way you have transformed me from a bitter tyrant into someone who might possibly deserve happiness." Tears spilled down Helena's cheeks. "Samuel." "I know I am asking you to risk much," Samuel said. "Society will not look kindly on a viscount marrying his daughter's governess. There will be talk, possibly scandal. But I am asking anyway because I cannot imagine my future without you in it. Will you marry me, Helena? Will you be my wife, Sophia's mother, the mistress of Blackmore Castle and of my heart?" Helena slid from the chair to kneel facing him, their hands still clasped. "I love you too," she whispered. "Despite every rational reason not to, despite the impossibility of it, despite the risks. I love you, Samuel Dalton, and yes, I will marry you." Their kiss was tentative at first, then deepening into something profound and precious. When they finally drew apart, both were laughing through tears. "Sophia will be insufferably pleased with herself," Helena said. "She has earned the right," Samuel replied. "She has been campaigning for this outcome since approximately your second week back at Blackmore." They married quietly in the castle's chapel 3 months later. Sophia, now 12 years old, served as maid of honor with solemn importance. The local gentry attended in force, their initial skepticism transformed into genuine approval when they witnessed the evident devotion between bride and groom. Mrs. Penrose wept throughout the ceremony, as did half the household staff. The years that followed brought blessings Helena had never dared imagine. Twin daughters arrived, followed by a son. Blackmore Castle transformed from a fortress of sorrow into a home filled with laughter and love. Sophia grew into a confident young woman, her natural brilliance nurtured by parents who treasured her completely. Samuel's harsh edges smoothed further with each passing year, though Helena's presence ensured he never forgot the lessons his cruelty had taught. But it was 5 years after their wedding that the final act of Helena's transformation occurred. A woman appeared at the servants' entrance on a grey November morning. She was thin to the point of emaciation, her clothing decent but worn, her face bearing the marks of hardship and shame. Mrs. Penrose came to Helena with the visitor's card, her expression carefully neutral. "The Marchioness of Ashford, my lady, though I believe she formerly held the title Lady Lillian Wickham." Helena's first instinct was to refuse the audience, but she had learned through her own suffering that second chances were precious gifts, not to be withheld lightly. She received Lillian in the morning room, noting the changes 5 years had wrought. The woman before her bore little resemblance to the haughty creature who had once attempted to destroy her. "I have no right to be here," Lillian said without preamble, her voice hoarse with suppressed emotion. "No right to ask anything of you after what I attempted to do. But I am desperate, Lady Dalton. My husband cast me off completely when the extent of my gambling debts became known. Society has ostracized me entirely. I have no resources, no prospects, no hope of respectable employment." Helena studied the woman who had once been her tormentor. "Why come to me?" "Because you showed me mercy once before, when you might have demanded legal prosecution for my theft. Because you are said to be kind to those in desperate circumstances. Because I have nowhere else to go." Lillian's voice broke. "I am asking for any position in your household. Scullery maid, laundress, anything. I will work for room and board alone if necessary. Please." Helena was silent for a long moment, memories of her own desperation in that Spitalfields dressmaking shop rising vividly. She had been saved by Samuel's willingness to look beyond her pride and offer a second chance. How could she do less for another woman, even one who had wronged her? "I will offer you a position in the still room," Helena said finally. "You will report to Mrs. Penrose and assist in preparing medicinal preparations, preserves and household remedies. The salary is £15 annually. You will be treated with the respect due to any member of this household, provided you perform your duties conscientiously. Is that acceptable?" Lillian stared at her in disbelief. "You would truly offer me employment after everything I did?" "I choose not to carry the burden of vengeance," Helena said quietly. "You taught me a valuable lesson when you attempted to destroy my reputation. You taught me exactly how not to treat people when I have power over them. For that I am grateful. I choose now to offer what you denied me then, which is dignity in desperate circumstances." She met Lillian's eyes steadily. "Mercy is rarely about deserving, Lady Ashford. It is about choosing to be better than our worst impulses. I'm giving you a fresh start, not because you have earned it, but because I believe in the possibility of redemption for those willing to work for it." Lillian wept then, great gasping sobs of relief and shame. "Thank you," she managed. "I swear I will not waste this chance." "See that you do not," Helena said gently. Lillian worked in the still room for 5 years, transforming from a broken woman into a valued member of the household staff. She learned to make the herbal remedies that eased the household's ailments, to preserve the summer's bounty for winter use, to create the delicate toiletries that graced the family's private chambers. She never spoke of her past, but her diligence spoke eloquently of her gratitude. What Lillian never knew was that Helena had secretly established a trust that would provide her with a modest pension in old age. The arrangement would only be revealed upon Helena's death, ensuring that the former Marchioness would have security in her final years. "Why?" Samuel asked when Helena told him of the trust. "After what she attempted to do to you?" "Because mercy given in secret is the purest kind," Helena replied. "Because I remember what it felt like to be desperate and alone, and I would not wish that fate on anyone. Because demonstrating that people can change requires giving them the support to do so." Samuel pulled his wife into his arms, marveling as always at the depths of her compassion. "You are a better person than I will ever be." "You are quite good enough," Helena assured him. "After all, you learned to see value in a governess when society told you she was beneath your notice." That required considerable evolution of character. The final scene of their story unfolded on a crisp autumn morning 15 years after their first meeting. Helena, pregnant with their fourth child, stood in the South Gardens watching Samuel teach their twin daughters to fly kites. Sophia, now 24 and recently engaged to a young baronet who worshipped her intelligence as much as her beauty, had come home from London to help plan the wedding. The estate thrived under their joint stewardship. The household hummed with contentment. Lillian, her hair now grey but her bearing dignified, tended the herb gardens below, her movements practiced and sure. She had become a fixture of the household, her presence a daily reminder of the transformative power of genuine second chances. Samuel joined Helena on the terrace, sliding an arm around her expanding waist. "Any regrets?" he asked softly. Helena leaned into his embrace, watching their daughters shriek with laughter as their kites soared. "Not one," she said firmly. "Every hardship, every humiliation, every impossible choice led me here. To you, to our children, to this life I love with every fiber of my being. How could I regret the journey when the destination is this perfect?" She turned to look up at him, her grey eyes bright with unshed tears of joy. "So you gave me a second chance when I had nothing left to offer but my dignity and my skills. You saw value in me when I could barely see it in myself. You taught me that people can change, that love can grow in the hardest soil, that redemption is always possible for those willing to fight for it." Samuel kissed her forehead gently. "You taught me the same, my love. You taught me that cruelty is a choice, and kindness is the braver path. That second chances are precious gifts not to be wasted. That the deepest love grows not from easy circumstances, but from choosing each other daily, despite our flaws and failures." They stood together watching their family, their household, their hard-won happiness spread before them like a feast. Below in the gardens, Lillian looked up and caught Helena's eye. She raised one hand in a small wave, a gesture of acknowledgement and gratitude. Helena waved back, her heart full. The greatest revenge, she had learned, was rising so far above one's enemies that they became irrelevant. But the greatest victory was choosing kindness anyway, offering second chances freely, and building a life so rich with love that past sorrows faded into insignificance beside present joy. She had been Miss Helena Mordaunt, daughter of a disgraced baron, governess at £22 per year, woman with nothing but her dignity and her courage. Now she was Viscountess Dalton, beloved wife, cherished mother, the heart of a household transformed by her fierce compassion. The journey from desperation to triumph had been long and painful. But standing in her husband's arms, surrounded by the family they had built together, Helena Mordaunt Dalton knew with absolute certainty that every step had been worth taking. For this, for love, for the radical act of choosing mercy over vengeance, hope over bitterness, and joy over sorrow. Always and forever for this. Thank you so much for staying with us until the end. If this story of resilience, redemption, and unexpected love touched your heart, please like, subscribe, and share with someone who needs to hear it. Your support helps us continue creating stories of courage, second chances, and the transformative power of choosing kindness, even when the world chooses cruelty.